What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Zwei, the Ilvard Insurrection. So last time around, we made our way around halfway through the second dungeon of the game, the Ordeum Shrine. I did say last episode that I was having a pretty easy time, but this episode, it was quite a bit tougher. There were some new enemies that were giving me quite a bit of trouble later on in the dungeon. Most notably, there were these guys who are called mantaps and also war sharks over here. I still haven't died in this game, but I did have to use quite a bit of food when I got to the end. And right before the end, I was met with frustration. There was this big block that was blocking the way to a slot machine. I haven't talked about these yet, but essentially they give you either 5 or 10 of a random food item, so they're extremely useful. Again, just another reminder that you could trade 10 of a food item in for a much better food item. Anyways, this giant block was blocking the way and I couldn't figure out what to do about it. After a few minutes, I got this genius idea of bombing it. It was pretty funny because I legitimately thought it was a great idea and that it was going to work, but it did absolutely nothing. Eventually, I gave up and went back to the end of the dungeon where I was met with another one of these blocks. Once again, I couldn't do anything, and so I fast traveled out of the dungeon to explore a little bit and figure out how to get past that block. I went to Arte and I saw Pokel and Pipiro hanging out in the restaurant. They talked about Arges and Pokel's mentor Kite. It seems like this Kite guy is a very influential figure in Pokel's life and has even helped Ragna out a little bit. This was a great moment and a nice little bonus scene, and I'm willing to bet that Kite is a mentor character at the start of the Arges adventure. After that, I went to the Arte airstrip and I spoke to Miriam's boss. I handed him the artifact I found in the abandoned Secunda mines, and I was rewarded with an increased crit rate. At this point, I still didn't know what to do, so I went back to the midpoint of the Ordeum Shrine. Now, both of the dungeons so far have had a branching point with two different areas about halfway through. It seems like the path on the right leads to the story boss, while the path on the left leads to an artifact or some sort of bonus. I decided that I might as well get the artifact while I was still trying to figure out what to do about the blocks. And while I was going through that, I gotta say that I did get just a little bit annoyed on one of the floors. There was a bunch of windmills that would blow Ragna away, and it was a bit annoying to pass them. Personally, I think this sort of stuff is a little bit extra in RPGs. I'd much rather just focus on combat, and this is just my opinion obviously, and it wasn't a big deal. I fought a mini-boss on the way to the top who was pretty damn easy. To be honest, it didn't even seem to be attacking me, but after a while I did realize it did do a little bit of damage. When I got to the top, I was rewarded with B parts. I took this back to the airstrip and I was rewarded with a new skill called Claw Gear. This allows me to grab a hold of enemies and certain items and move them, and this is exactly what I needed to continue on in the dungeon. So I worked back to the end, got my slot machine, and then moved on to the last area. Here there was a man in hiding who decides to test her skill against a creature by the name of Epheromoga. I didn't even get close to pronouncing that. Now for the first bit, I was trying to use Alwen and attack from a distance, and it wasn't working out very well. My attacks were not doing much damage, so I switched it up to Ragna and rushed in, and it worked out a lot better. I really got in its space, and a lot of his longer range attacks wouldn't hit me, and on top of that, Ragna was doing a lot of damage. This boss wasn't difficult at all overall, and I had a much harder time with the first boss. After the battle, Alwen gets back her freezing magic, but her celebration is short-lived as the mysterious man reveals himself. He's actually a werewolf named Diegold and works for an individual who stole Alwen's castle. Now we get a lot of new information here. First, we find out that True Blood vampires and werewolves formed an alliance in the old war, and that werewolves are now breaking it. We also get some tidbits on Alwen's father, whose name was Duke Giscard, and he was killed when he rose in revolt against the Gilded Demon Lord. Diegold then gets a little bit cocky and states that Alwen and Ragna need to train before their next encounter because he would wipe the floor with them right now. Ragna gets mad at this and attempts to attack him, but Diegold makes quick work of him. Now, I don't really understand why Diegold wouldn't just kill both of them right here. I suppose that he's cocky, but I don't think that it's a good enough explanation, and I find it to be a bit of a cop-out. Before leaving, Diegold delivers a message from his bloodlord to Alwen, which I quote, "Your resistance, dear child, is amusing, but it ultimately is a vain and fleeting act. Accept your own helplessness and watch in obedient silence as my grand design unfolds." The game then cuts to later on that night, and Ragna and Alwen are in Arte. She points out that Daigold called his boss his Blood Lord, which means that he has a blood contract that is similar to Ragna and Alwen's blood contract. From this, Alwen concludes that whoever is behind everything is the True Blood vampire, but that she doesn't know of any other True Bloods. We then get another scene with Pokel and Pipiro. I was honestly surprised at this because I thought that they were going to be more of a cameo appearance for fans of the first game, but they seem to be important characters in this game as well. They seem to be relaying information about Ragna and Alwen to two characters named Claude and Fiona. Interesting enough, Claude already seems to know quite a bit about Ragna, but knows nothing about Alwen. Fiona is concerned that Alwen and Ragna might be responsible for Ilvard's recent troubles, noting that they have not received any mail and that their radio signals have been cut since the two of them started working together. It also seems like Pipiro and Pokel are here to search for a jewel. Now, this scene does make Pipiro and Pokel look a little bit scummy, but I don't think that's necessarily the case given that they are the protagonists of the other Zwei game, but I do think there's a good chance that Fiona and Claude are involved in some sort of conspiracy here. The next day, Alwen and Ragna discuss their next plan. Alwen says she can't detect any of her magic nearby, but she believes that it would be beneficial to visit a witch who resides in the Gloomfeld Woods, known as Ra. We also see this mysterious character here who's following Ragna and Alwen. Now, just like before, I went back to the Ordeum Shrine to open up a new area with Alwen's newly found freezing magic. Now, this area was fairly standard. The most interesting thing about it was that the boss was a staircase, and I essentially had to beat it to be allowed to move up. And also, I actually needed the boss to land on a switch to unlock a door, which is something I didn't achieve until a little bit later on. At the end of the dungeon, I was once again greeted by the masked man named Galandia. I did an awkward dance and I received another Arcana skill. After this, I spent a little bit more time talking to NPCs in Arte. This conversation with Fiona was my takeaway. She was very kind in this conversation, which clearly shows that she's not being entirely genuine, given the scene we saw of her earlier where she was suspicious of us. On the way to the woods, I decided to check out this ice mountain, and again I was met by Pokel and Pipiro, who once again seem suspicious and leave right away after they see Ragna and Alwen. In the woods, Alwen quickly realizes that her magic is actually in fact here, and I was honestly pretty relieved at this because I was really worried this woods section would be filler, but that doesn't seem to be the case. The dungeon itself was once again a bit more complex than the previous one. I didn't have trouble with any of the enemies besides this guy over here, who I actually had to run away from since he was doing a ridiculous amount of damage. I also found this math game, which like the name suggests, lets you do math. I solved a whole bunch of the problems, but nothing seemed to have happened. So as of right now, I have no clue what this item actually does. And at the halfway point of this dungeon, Ragna finally realizes that they are being followed, and we meet Subaru, an aspiring ninja. He begs Ragna and Alwen to train him, and after a little bit of back and forth conversation, Ragna does agree to train him despite not being able to teach him the skills that are directly relevant to being a ninja. And that is where we will end off today. Next time around, we will continue our way through the Gloomfeld Woods and unlock more of Alwen's magic. I gotta say, I am enjoying the story in this game a lot more than I thought I would. I had little to no expectation for story going into this game, and while it's not excellent by any means, it's certainly keeping me engaged and interested. There's a lot of different motivations and parties involved in this plot, and it is shaping up to be very solid. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day.